Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of the Book Review Blog. Today we're going to finish the review of Just After Sunset by Stephen King. If you had seen my first part of this review, I mentioned that this is a collection of short stories. There are 13 of them, and in my past review I did 5 of them, so I'm going to finish with the remaining 8 hopefully today. So let's get started. The next story that's in this book is called The Things They Left Behind, and it is a story about a man named Scott Stanley who is an insurance salesman in New York City. And this is around 2002, and he starts to notice things in his apartment that were, not there, that they were placed there, but they weren't his. And he knows whose they are. They used to belong to coworkers of his, and there's a pair of sunglasses, there's, I think, a penny in a lucite cube, there's other things like that. And what's really kind of sad and kind of spooky about this story is that you have to understand what I already told you. Scott was an insurance salesman, but where his office was. His office was on the 110th floor of the World Trade Center. Not sure which tower, but and because of the events of September 11th, 2001, he his job or his building was attacked by the terrorists, and Scott was not there. He was not at his building that day, and it proceeds to tell you why he wasn't. I'm not going to tell you that, but he is figuring out that these are tokens of things that people that he worked with left behind, and that they wanted him to do things with these objects, because obviously they couldn't because they're dead. So anyway, I liked it. It was a little sad story. Again, it didn't have. It was kind of spooky, of like supernatural things about how things appear in a house that aren't yours. But anyway, it was kind of a sad thing because, again, it dealt with events of September 11th. So the next story is called Graduation Afternoon, and this is also a story that takes place in, I believe, 2002 or early 2000s in New York. This doesn't exactly have to do with September 11th because the events are, I think they're actually pre-2001. They're actually like the summer before the attacks. So, and the story is about a woman named Janice who is 18. She just is about to graduate from high school, and she is attending her boyfriend's graduation party. Her boyfriend goes to another school and had graduated 2 or 3 weeks earlier than Janice did. So they're sitting in, this party and having, a nice old time, and all of a sudden Janice looks up in the sky to the distance of New York City, and all of a sudden she hears, and all around them they hear this big boom, like this big explosion. And next thing that they hear or see is this gigantic mushroom cloud. And that's kind of it. You don't know, you kind of know what happens to this people. It's kind of, if you had seen my last review of part 1, it was kind of like the story of, let me find it, of Harvey's Dream, where like you knew kind of that Stephen King didn't give you indication of what happened. You're just kind of left to your own ideas and context from the story to figure out what happened. So that's the same with this Graduation Afternoon. Very much like Harvey's Dream, it was short. It was kind of, again, like The Things They Left Behind, it was kind of sad because this is not this is scary in the fact of, but not supernaturally scary. It was something that could happen. And, like, you know, an atomic bomb has hit not the United States, but, you know, Japan and things like that. And you all, if you remember what happened with that or have seen pictures, that developed like a giant mushroom cloud and had very lasting effects. So anyway, the next story is called N, and it's kind of weird because it's one of those like stories within a stories within a story type thing. What is happening in this story is this psychiatrist is writing about a patient of his, and just because of confidentiality, the psychiatrist has named his patient N. And N is a man, and he has come to this psychiatrist with traits of OCD. And he is describing how this OCD took effect, or how it's happened. And he claims, this N character claims, that this OCD tendency happened after he took a trip to this park. And he took a trip, and he mentioned feeling very weird there and just having strange effects and strange feelings. And he counted the stones in this park and came across that there were 7. And with this tendency of OCD, according to this N character, you can't have 7 or an odd number. You have to have 8. But every time that this N character would bring a camera to take pictures of these stones, in the little flash thing, or little viewfinder thing, 8 stones would appear. So, and then it would, after his experience there, it would happen where he would have to count everything, and he would place things, you know, in certain ways. One of an example is in the psychiatrist's office all the time. He had a vase of flowers and a Kleenex box, and the vase of flowers and the Kleenex box had to be diagonal to each other on the table. And it was all essentially because this N character had gone to this certain park, and the psychiatrist had found himself being very intrigued and had also gone to this park and had shown beginning tendencies of OCD similar to this N character. And that's where I'm going to leave it, because it was one of those stories that I wasn't sure that I got all of us, you know, that I understood. Some Stephen King books and short stories are like that, where it's, in my mind, it's so weird that, like, wait, is this really what, is this as simple as just this plot, or am I making too much out of this, or trying to get something else out of this that isn't there? But it was pretty good. But it's like a story within a story within a story, so you have to remember whose perspective it is and who's telling the story. So the next story is called The Cat from Hell, and this one was funny because, or the idea was kind of fun, because the main character of this story is called Holston, and Holston is a hitman, and he has been hired by this very rich man to make a hit. And unfortunately, kind of not like a normal hitman where you'd take a hit on a person. This old man wants Holston to take a hit on his cat. And Holston meets the cat, and the cat is very friendly to Holston as he's meeting with this older gentleman, and so Holston is very perplexed on why this old man wants this cat killed. And so this old man starts to tell the story of why. And it just happened that members of his household had seen this stray cat around the neighborhood and had taken him in. And but when for each person who had taken care of this cat, doom or death would befell these people. So multiple people had died unexpectedly, and they all figured that it was because of this cat. And normally the cat would be in their vicinity when they died, whether it be a car crash or an accident at home and things like that. So Holston takes the job and kind of takes the cat with him to make the hit elsewhere. And I won't spoil what happens to Holston. It's funny and kind of gross, but again, it's just kind of funny that of this kind of situation of a hitman having to kill a cat. So the next story is called The New York Times at Special Bargain Rates, and that is a story about a woman named Annie, and she is at home and she gets a phone call from her husband James, and which doesn't normally seem all that unusual. However, her husband James was killed in a plane crash 2 or 3 days ago. So everyone is there, and they're all of Annie's and James's family is at Annie's house because they're arranging for James's funeral and things like that. And so this is really bizarre that Annie is getting a call from James, obviously. And James describes where he is. He describes it. He's not in heaven necessarily or hell necessarily. He describes it as a train station, or he describes it as Grand Central, where he's like, there are doors where people go through the doors and they don't come back. So I don't know if through the doors is heaven or hell, meaning this Grand Central is kind of like limbo or what. But James is supposedly on a cell phone, and the cell phone is dying. And so because Annie keeps hearing beeps, and she's trying to keep James on the phone, obviously, for one last meeting with her husband and one last contact with her husband. And it's very sweet that her husband, the last thing that he tells her, he calls to tell her that he loved her and he, wants her to move on and things like that. So it was, again, a very sad story, not scary in the fact other than getting a call from a dead man, similar to the things they left behind. But I'm not sure why the title is called the way it is. I'm sure I missed that somewhere in the story, but I know it was mentioned at the very end, but it kind of had nothing to do with the story. But anyway, the next story is called Mute, and this is about a man who, I don't think he's mentioned. Oh, Monette is his name, excuse me. Monette is is a church confessional, and he is telling a priest about a possible sin that he committed. And Monette doesn't know if it's a sin or not, but he proceeds to tell him that on his way driving to home or from work, Monette picks up a hitchhiker, and the hitchhiker has a sign that says, "I am deaf and I am mute." So while the hitchhiker is in the car with him, Monette just kind of starts to talk, and just to because the radio is off, and he has a passenger, and even though he's a deaf mute, he feels like he needs to talk to him. So Monette starts to talk to this man about how much he hates his wife, and how much that his wife has caused him harm or pain, I guess, because his wife cheated on him, and now they are divorced and things like that. And so when Monette stops at a rest stop to relieve himself, and he leaves the hitchhiker in the car because he doesn't know what to do with him. And when he comes back, the hitchhiker is gone. But all of Monette's stuff is there. He doesn't take anything. So he wants to find the guy, but he doesn't find him. And but later on, Manette learns that his ex-wife and his ex-wife's lover have been brutally murdered. So it's under suspicions, according to Manette anyway, that this hitchhiker was not, may have been mute, but he was not deaf, where he had heard Manette talking and he had done this crime. So he's figuring out, did I commit this, or did I kind of was an accessory to this crime? And so that's kind of the story. And the next story is called Ayana. And this one was a little hard to understand because, or hard to explain, I guess. Ayana is about a man who, throughout his life, he has been put in situations where people have wanted to touch him or talk to him. And these people are very sick, and they are, what happens is that after the people touch him or talk to him, they end up dying or they end up getting better. But this man, a lot of times that when these people talk to him, this man is also sick, whether he has cancer or whether he just has ailments. But every time that the people talk to him, this man gets better. So it seems like these people are on their way to the afterlife or heaven or whatever, and wants to help this man out to relieve whatever ailment he has. Again, it was very kind of strange to get. I didn't really understand it very well, or I didn't like it so much, but hopefully if you read the story, you'll understand it more than I did and appreciate it. So the last story in this collection is called A Very Tight Place, and it's about two men who are neighbors, and one of the neighbors is I wish I knew names because this would make it clear, or I wish I remembered names. One of the neighbors thinks that the other neighbor had killed his dog, and so they had a really long feud, and that happened before the story started, but it explains how these two people hated each other. And this other neighbor who kills his dog, or is a construction worker, and he kind of traps this man, or kind of goads this man into going to his construction site and, wanting to talk things over. But instead, what this construction worker does is make the man, like by gunpoint, makes the man get into a porta potty. And this man in a porta potty the porta potty has tipped over to where the man is lying, and the door is on the ground, so he can't get out via door. And, unfortunately, not to be gross, but it is gross that the porta potty's things are out. So it's a very gross story in that matter, with excrement and all of that. And so now the man in the porta potty has to figure out how to get out. And that's why it's called A Very Tight Place, because it's not like he's claustrophobic exactly, but it is hot. It's the middle of summer, so the porta potty is very stinky, obviously, and very stifling. So I'm not going to give out how he gets out, but he does, and how he takes his revenge on the man who put him there, because, again, I want you to read the book. So that's it for Just After Sunset. Again, I like Stephen King's short stories because they're just little snippets of his work, and there's a lot of them, and they're all different, but they all kind of otherwise have similar qualities to them. The next book by Stephen King I'm going to read is called Under the Dome, and it's a very thick book, but I've already started it, so I will read that hopefully quickly or in a good time, and I will review that, and I bid you all farewell and happy reading.